Hi, this is Joe from the Pond Guy, here to show you how to perform maintenance on your SolidFlo pond pump. Over time, debris and other buildup can get caught inside the unit and reduce water flow. To ensure your pump continues to operate properly, we recommend to perform maintenance at least once per year. Maintenance should be performed during fall shutdown or before you put the SolidFlo back into your pond in the spring. The tools and items you will need to complete this maintenance are a No. 2 Phillips screwdriver, snap ring pliers, 2 large flathead screwdrivers, a pick tool, a soft cloth or small brush, and a descaler such as white vinegar or CLR. Before you start any maintenance, be sure to unplug your pump, disconnect the plumbing, and remove the pump from the pond. First, turn the pump over to expose the 4 screws on the bottom of the pump intake cage. Using your No. 2 Phillips screwdriver, remove these 4 screws. Now, separate the top and bottom of the intake cage and gently lift out the pump. Next, you will need to use your No. 2 Phillips screwdriver to remove the 4 screws securing the impeller cap. Using a flathead screwdriver, gently remove the impeller cap. Remove the 4 additional screws on the pump housing to separate it from the motor housing. With the motor housing exposed, gently pull out the entire impeller assembly from the motor housing. Use your snap ring pliers to remove the snap ring on the end of the impeller shaft. Then, using 2 flathead screwdrivers, gently separate the impeller from the rest of the impeller assembly. Next, remove the top plate to expose the bearing. The bearing should then be lifted from the rotor for easier handling. Now, gently peel the screen from the bearing. The use of a small pick tool may be helpful. Finally, use a cloth or small brush and some water to clean the bearing and bearing screen, the impeller and rotor, the top plate, impeller cap, and impeller cap O-ring, the pump housing, the motor housing and O-ring, and finally, the pump intake cage. The use of white vinegar or CLR may be helpful for hard to remove debris. When using a descaler, be sure to rinse with clean water before reassembling. Now it's time to reassemble. To reassemble your pump, first press the bearing screen back into the bearing. Then place the bearing onto the rotor. Now place the top plate back onto the shaft and align the notches on the top plate with the notches on the bearing. Next, place the impeller onto the shaft by aligning the flat edge of the impeller with the flat edge of the shaft. Then, press firmly to secure into place. Note the impeller should remain flush with the bottom of the notch where the snap ring will go. Pushing the impeller too far onto the shaft will limit the rotation of the impeller and in some cases prevent the unit from turning on. An easy test for this is to spin the top plate. If it spins freely, the impeller is seated correctly. If the top plate does not spin freely, the impeller is pushed in too far. Now, using your snap ring pliers, reinstall the snap ring with the opening of the ring pointing to the flat side of the impeller shaft. Next, reinstall the O-ring onto the motor housing, and then insert the impeller assembly. You may need to rotate the impeller assembly to align the holes in the top plate with the notches on the motor housing. Next, place the pump housing onto the motor housing and secure with the 4 flat end screws. Install the O-ring onto the impeller cap, ensuring that it's sitting flush on the top of the cap. Now, reinstall the impeller cap by matching the groove in the cap to the groove in the pump housing. Secure with the 4 smaller screws. Finally, place the pump into the bottom section of the pump intake cage by aligning the discharge and power cord with the notches on the cage. Align and place the top half of the intake cage over the pump. Hold the 2 sections of the intake cage together and flip the SolidFlo pump over. Finally, reinstall the 4 large screws to secure the pump intake cage. You are now completed with the maintenance of your SolidFlo pump and are ready to reinstall it back into your pond.
For more expert tips, visit us online at thepondguy.com or give us a call at 866-POND-HELP.